Hey everybody, this is Townsend. Thank you so much for tuning in. As a lot of you know, these conversations began as joined live streams that turned into podcasts to help reach more people and spread more hope. Thank you so much for your patience with the quality of sound as we figure out the best way to bring you these important chats, just in hopes of spreading more love and positivity. I hope you enjoy. And we've got a ton of people logged in for the 17th time. This is Townsend. This is Kyle. I'm interviewing him. Today's topic is mostly about addiction. He's going through what he calls long-term recovery, and I wanted to learn a little bit about it myself, and I thought he was the perfect person to do it. So he's just going to kind of talk about his testimony, his process through everything. And I know personally, I know a lot of people that struggle with this topic. So I'm super interested in just kind of shining a light on the subject. So Colin has a question. It says, for someone struggling with addiction living on the streets, what advice do you have for family members who want to help but aren't sure what to do? If going the legal route to try and admit a loved one, is there success in that process? So it's kind of two questions in one. So basically, what advice do you have for family members who want to help but aren't sure what to do? What would you say about that?
Well, that's a common question to have a lot of conversations with family members, just like a lot of people had a lot of conversations with my family members. And the answer to the question is not one that people necessarily like to hear, because the reality is that we ultimately can't do anything until an individual wants to do something themselves. And that's a really hard place to be as a family member. My mom, my family, they watched me battle for a long time. And they came to a point where my mom went to some meetings called Al-Anon, which are support meetings for family members of people that are in addiction, so their loved ones. And they go there and they find kind of their part in the whole process, because the disease of addiction is certainly a family disease, because it affects, like Colin's referring to, the whole family, not just the person going through it. And so she went there and she learned about enabling. She learned about how maybe she had even been contributing to my problem, but she also learned how to let go without giving up. And so those are two different things. You know, you don't give up on a loved one. My family never gave up on me, but they certainly let go. And, you know, it's sad because I didn't get help as soon as they let go. But what I did start experiencing was a lot of the consequences for my actions. And that bottom that I kept hitting started getting harder and harder and harder, because there wasn't someone there, to bail me out of jail, to provide me a warm place to sleep, to bring me money when I come up with whatever kind of crazy story I've came up with this time. They simply, for several years, I wasn't allowed on my family's property unless I was going to treatment that day. It wasn't necessarily like you can go to treatment tomorrow, but if I was on the property, we're going to treatment that day. And so it got to that point, and that was, I look back and I called my family and my mom every name in the book. Like, I hated her, threatened to kill myself, and, terrible things. And I was so mad and so angry, and I didn't know it then, but I know it now, that that's ultimately one of the things that saved my life, because if she wouldn't have made those tough decisions and helped me get to a place on my own, then I wouldn't be here today. I would be dead. So I'm thankful that she did that, but it wasn't, she made the decision and there was instant results that I was like, okay, I want help. I mean, there was 3 to 5 years after she went to Al-Anon and they stopped enabling me, where I, suffered a lot of consequences, was homeless. Like you're referring to someone on the street, is if, the best thing you can do is to, if they want help, or if they're willing to have a conversation with someone like myself or somebody else that has had experience and been in the place that they're at, get them connected to them. Because my family for a long time tried to get through to me. And honestly, 3.5 years ago, when I was went to the Nehemiah House, a program here in Little Rock, I was hearing a lot of the same information that my family had been saying for years, but the difference was who it was coming from. My family is not oftentimes not the right person to try to deliver that message, because of that relationship that you've had for so long. And so, that's a lot, I know, but the advice would be to realize that it's not your fault, and also realize that there's a way to let go without giving up. And if the individual's ready or willing, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter the motivation, if they're willing to talk to someone about what's going on and potentially pursue treatment, get them connected with somebody. And then the rest, is up to them. It's just really up to them to kind of initiate that and engage in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. So she also says, if going the legal route to try and admit a loved one, is there success in that process?
I wouldn't recommend it. I can't speak to if there's success in that process. I'm sure there has been some times where that has been successful. But I'm a believer in the fact that when you force somebody to do something, I think more oftentimes than not, when the whatever the reason an individual is forced to do something, when that's removed, then a lot of times they may resort back to what they were doing because they were trying to appease this court order. Not saying it can't work. I'm not saying not to try it, but certainly in the field of work I do as a peer support specialist, we are all about empowering an individual to make their own choices and to set their own path and to take those steps on their own as we guide and walk with them. So it could work, but it oftentimes is it's a really delicate, tricky situation when you involve legal situations into the process.
I can only imagine. So kind of a background. I got a hold of your bio since we're not trying the Facebook thing. So this is Kyle. He is a certified peer recovery support specialist and one of 10 certified peer support supervisors in the state. So he's also got a science in addiction study, or Bachelors of Science in Addiction Studies from UCA. He's got a lot of accolades, so super cool to chit chat with him. All right, so what we're going to do, I've got a few questions that I want to ask Kyle just to kind of chit chat about his story. I want him to be able to share it with you guys. And then I had a lot of feedback for him. So we're going to do some questions at the very end, if that's cool with you, Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if you guys have any questions along the way, throw them in the comments. We'll be happy to stop and answer them for you. All right. So you kind of did this a little bit earlier, but give a brief summary of your story. So I know, like I said, when you introduced yourself, you gave a little bit, but kind of tell us why you're here. Like, when did the addiction start? When did it end? And how the heck did you get where you are now?
Yeah. So it's certainly a long story. So I will
let's summarize it and then we'll jump in.
So I started using alcohol when I was about 12 years old. That quickly progressed to using marijuana, where I got arrested at the age of 16 and kind of took on that personality, that identity of the pothead, the person that likes to drink. And so all throughout high school, I was on probation and experimented with other drugs. Went off to college. I got my wisdom teeth removed and got a prescription of opioids. And I started abusing those every day while also drinking, using other drugs, smoking weed. Those were just kind of givens. But the pills became like my new priority, my main drug of choice. But also, I was also doing really good in school. That was actually where I first met you, or came to know you, Townsend. My friend Brad Cash was also into music. Yeah. And so I remember knowing you from that time in life. But I did really well in school. It's like a little unusual. You think of an addict or someone struggling with addiction. You think, like Colin mentioned, on the street, struggling, that type of situation. I was doing really well, dressed nice. I was holding leadership positions in campus organizations in my fraternity. I was making really good grades, letters getting sent home from the dean, the president, about the grades I was making. So I was really doing well. On the outside, you look at it, a guy in his 20s was doing everything he should be doing. He was doing it well. But underneath all that, I was abusing pain pills every day. And I was spending hundreds of dollars on these pills. I was also pursuing, ironically, at the same time, a Bachelors of Science in Addiction Studies, because substance use is very prevalent in my family. And I thought, I was going to get this degree and I was going to help other people like my family, but not that the information actually applied to me in my personal life. So I graduate college, skimming through, because my addiction really took over, and I was spending crazy amounts of money and struggling to get past that last semester in school. But I remember waking up that day when I walked across the stage, and I don't remember it being like a glorious day or a day of celebration. I remember it being a day where I woke up and I was sick and I was in withdrawal, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to get something because I know family was coming into town. I had to put on that face, and look like everything's cool and everything's good. And It should be a day that I remember as like I'm celebrating all the hard work and the accomplishments that I've done up to this point. The first person in my family to graduate from college. It should be that kind of day when I look back. But what I look back and remember is waking up and being in withdrawal and being sick, and finally finding someone in that panic, finding someone that had some pills that I could go buy from them, going and picking them up, eating them all at once, and that giving me enough strength to walk across the stage and pick up my degree. And so I picked up that degree, and for the next year, I stayed up in Conway's trying to continue doing what I was doing, and things started really slowly unwinding and kind of falling apart. Ended up moving back home, where I started getting in trouble, and all the things that usually are associated with addiction, like we referred to earlier, they started happening pretty fast. So this was about 2014 at this point, and it was within 2 years I had progressed from using pills to using heroin because of the amount of money that pills cost. Heroin is cheaper. It's essentially the exact same thing, and everybody was selling it. One day I was sick. I didn't have enough money to buy the pills, but my guy I was buying pills from, he was like, "Hey, I have heroin. I'll give it to you for free." And so he gave it to me that day, and from that day, I started using heroin. And it wasn't long after that I started using the needle. At this point, I'd only ate pills. I'd snorted them. I was like, I'd never use a needle. I'd never be that person. The image that society labels as someone that uses drugs. Like, I'm not that person, right? And that's part of my problem, is that I thought that, like, I was different, or I was like an exception, and that I would be able to do these things and to suffer no consequences for them. And that's just not true. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, your upbringing, your background, your cultural, your beliefs, anything. Like, it doesn't discriminate. And I had to learn that the hard way. And so I ended up, I'm on the needle, using heroin, basically ruined everything in my life. I'm in and out of jail for stealing, got a DWI, all the typical things, the consequences. At this time, my family had pulled out of my life. And so I'm just struggling, house to house, couch to couch. And I find myself in a park back in 2016. I was homeless, and that was the first time I went home, and I was like, I can't do nothing. So that was the second time actually I went to treatment, and I went to a 30-day program. I got out of there, realized I need to stop getting high, but I kept drinking alcohol. And this is an important lesson that I had to learn, and many have to learn in recovery, is that alcohol is the same thing. It's a substance. And those that struggle with substances, it's not a matter of which particular substance, it's all the same. And so I started drinking. I kept drinking, and it wasn't long before that I started getting high again. And within like 6 months from that period, anything I'd gained in that last 9 months, I destroyed again. I was homeless, wrecked my car, totaled my car. And so it all came to like a head July 10th of 2017. I'd been in a hotel trying to get off of heroin by using meth. And I was, in a psychosis. I was hallucinating. I thought people were out to get me. And I have an uncle that's in recovery himself. And he came and picked me up and dropped me off at a homeless shelter called the Nehemiah House. This homeless shelter also has a recovery program. Well, the next morning, the directors came in. They called an ambulance because I was just out of my mind. And so I went to Baptist for detox. And I went from detox back to that program. And I went through their 9-month faith-based program. And that is what started me on the journey that I'm on today, where slowly but surely, one day at a time, nothing happened overnight. I started getting hope for myself. I started believing that a life that didn't center around using drugs and alcohol was possible for me. And I started realizing, that there was a God that loves me, and that there's a God that's created me for a purpose. And that purpose was not to hurt my family, my friends, and myself by using drugs and alcohol. And that being in recovery and not drinking or using drugs is not like a bad thing. It's not like something that's restrictive or something's been taken out of my life. It's actually one of the greatest gifts that I've ever been given. And so, like I said, it's a process that I've gone through and that I continue to go through every day. And I learned a lot of things in that program about a relationship with God, about, some disciplines, and about community, surrounding myself with some people that are trying to do the same thing as me, that love me, that care about me, that hold me accountable, that I can talk to on those days where I'm thinking about drinking or getting high, and it'd be okay to just process that with somebody. I learned a lot of different principles and ways of living that I just continue to apply. And that's what, as day by day, brought me to where I'm at today.
So that's funny you brought up college because I totally remember you and you had the long, like beautiful blonde hair. And I remember talking to people about Kyle and how shy he was. And like, I don't think you ever spoke to me, but I saw you everywhere. You're like
Yeah.
so shy and your hair like covered your face. Yeah. But like seeing your story and kind of, I mean, that's been 10 years ago now or more. We're kind of aging ourselves.
Wow.
Ugh. But seeing you, like how far you've come, one, like you said, I never would have guessed. Seeing you in college, you looked like you totally had it all. Like you said, you dressed nice, you were cute, you were smart, you were in a fraternity, super popular. So definitely can't judge a book by its cover there, I guess. Do you feel like addiction, you kind of touched on the relationship side, but do you feel like addiction and mental health kind of correlate? Do you feel like they go together? Do you feel like maybe depression ties in with addiction or more so genetics like you were talking about?
Yeah, I think it's all hand in hand. Addiction and mental health. It's co-occurring. There's a lot of substance use and mental health, and certainly in my case, I didn't never have like a mental health diagnosis, but as a result of my drug use, it was certainly drug induced. But I experienced all kinds of mental health symptoms like anxiety, obviously depression. And that kind of led me, and being in that psychosis, they had to level me out, get me on some meds for a period of time. And if that would have taken place, I'd have never got to a place where I could, receive new information, receive recovery. So the mental health side of things, oftentimes, because I work with people that are going through the same thing today, like you have to clear that up first. And sometimes the mental health was substance induced and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's co-occurring and you have to address both simultaneously. But oftentimes, if you can get the mental health, remove the substance, address the mental health, then you can kind of get a better picture of what you're actually working with. So it's definitely hand in hand. And I think when you talk about genetics, certainly genetics plays a role into addiction. I don't just because you have a father, mother, grandmother that uses drugs or abuses drugs and alcohol does not mean that that's what you're set out to do. But I think it does play a role in it. Like I mentioned, it's certainly in my family, but my mom was the one that showed me how I should do things. And she set an example for me that I could have followed. I made that choice long ago to try to experiment myself. But I think when I made that choice that I was more susceptible to the disease of addiction once I began that journey, than say someone that had nobody in their family that has suffered from the disease of addiction. So genetics, mental health, it's all, very much, plays a huge role, a significant role in addiction.
I can see that for sure. It's crazy, drug induced, I work with geriatrics as well, and you can have drug induced dementia and things like that, which is just wild. So many medications just causing so many issues. It's just crazy that it can affect so much.
Yeah, and when you use a substance for because when we use whatever our substance is, it's dopamine, it's serotonin, it's that feel good. That when you release that so much over and over and over again, like you do when you abuse drugs or alcohol, it damages those neurons and the transmitters, and I don't want to get too scientific, but it does damage in your brain. And so when your body can no longer naturally reproduce those chemicals on its own like it used to, comes in depression, because when you can't have the things that make you naturally feel good, you're not going to feel so well. And so a lot of times mental health medications address those and kind of help, get someone, getting those chemicals back to a regular balance and back to some type of normal production. And so I think a lot of times that can definitely cause a lot of the different mental health symptoms as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense for sure. So through all that, how many years altogether do you feel like you struggled? From 12 to
27.
So quite a while.
Yeah, it was if it wasn't drugs, it was always alcohol. I mean, from the time I started, it was there was always a point in my life where I was doing something.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, kind of in college, I mean, you fit in your fraternity, everybody's drinking. So if you're always drinking around friends, they don't notice anything, which is pretty sad. You can just put it on the back burner and nobody knows to give you help. Not that it would have helped or not helped, but it's sad that it's It's hard to see. So what, through all those years, after all that time, was that almost 15 years, what was your aha moment that made you think like, this is it, it's time to turn around?
I look back today, hindsight being 2020, as they say, and I can see a lot of those moments. There's several of them that probably should have been that key pivotal turning point. But I didn't respond, and it was like I was talking about earlier, dealing with family members that are going through this. Family can see it, like it's so clear as day, like this is the problem, this is the issue. But when you're in the middle of it, you can't see it so clearly. And so I was the same way. And so my aha moment didn't happen probably until about 2 months into the Nehemiah house. I had a little bit of that moment when I was at the hospital, because I mean, that psychosis and those hallucinations that I had were so real that it didn't matter what you told me. It was my reality. And now I know it wasn't real, but at the time it was. And even for a couple of weeks after, even when I wasn't high anymore, it still felt so real, and trying to convince myself and my mind and my body that, like, hey, this didn't happen. That was scary.
Yeah.
That scared me a whole lot. I'd never really been in that place. So that was like the beginning of it. But
Yeah.
it was about 2 months, 6 weeks, 8 weeks into the Nehemiah House program. I just took I can't tell you exactly what I was doing. I think it was more of a process. I call it my process of surrendering, that I started just taking like inventory of my life and like where I was at, and how I was once living, like you mentioned. Like I thought, I
Yeah.
was on top of the world, and like I could do whatever I wanted, and I was going on trips, and everything was fun, and I loved life and all these things. And then where was I? I found myself like essentially in a homeless shelter with nothing, no family, no friends that, because I had removed them all from my life. And I just started looking at, like, is this what I want my life to be? I couldn't see at that point what my life could be, but I just started believing that I didn't want my life to be what it is currently. And so my aha moment was, over that 8 weeks, there were some people that worked at this program, and I was watching them, and they had been through the program themselves, and they were living a somewhat normal life. And watching them, and also hearing the things that I was hearing in that program, I started thinking that I could do that. Like, I can do what they're doing. My life can look like that. And I don't have to keep doing what I'm doing today. And so it wasn't necessarily a moment. It was kind of a series of different moments that led me to make the decision I gave my life to Jesus, and I also surrendered to the idea that God was going to use that program to change my life. And so I was going to also follow the rules of the program. I was going to listen to the people in the program. I was going to, to the best of my ability, apply the stuff that they were telling me into my life. And it was when I made those two decisions when things started really turning around for me.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's really cool. I bet they were like, oh my gosh, somebody that wants to listen, like just soaked it in. That's really cool. So, and I think a lot of people actually ask this when they had a question. So when you finally decided to quit, and like I said at the very beginning, I know several people that have struggled or currently struggle with some type of addiction. When you decided to quit and you became clean and you made this promise to yourself, do you feel like it's still a daily struggle? So is it still something you kind of have to try at, or does it become natural? You don't even crave it anymore?
Well, I saw that question, and honestly, on my piece of paper right here, I marked out struggle when I put process. So it is much a daily process. I don't want to refer to it as a
Yeah.
daily struggle, because that indicates that I'm just like struggling through
Yeah.
life. And I'm not struggling through life by any means, but I am always in a process.
Yeah.
Just like addiction took a long time to get me to where I was at, recovery is a process, but I have to remain in. And it's not that I have to do. It's not like it started like at the beginning, like you have to do this. Today I get to do these things. Like, I get to live a life that is free from drugs and alcohol. But if I stop doing the things that I've been doing to get me to this place, it may not happen overnight, but slowly but surely I will slide back into old patterns of thinking and behaving. And more than likely I will end up using drugs and alcohol again. And so I won't say it's a daily struggle, but I would say that I've learned a new lifestyle, and that I had to continue to live that lifestyle and practice the tools and the principles that I've learned in that lifestyle to continue to get the same results that I had today. But it's not a struggle. It's actually a blessing, and I'm thankful for it. It's a really abundant life. And, you know, like I mentioned earlier, having those days where life is life, storms of life come. They're going to come. We all face them, especially of the year we just came out of. I mean, how many storms did we each face individually and as a whole? But when those storms come, and maybe even that thought to get a pill or drink comes, because it may come and it does come, like I've learned today that that's a thought, and a thought does not have to become an action. But something that I've learned in recovery, the thought has to become something, and that something can look different for different people. But for me, you know, it can look like a phone call. It can look like getting coffee with another person in recovery. It can look like going to a meeting. It can look like going to church. It can look like just getting myself out into nature and doing something like that, going playing sports. I got to do something with it, you know, but I know today that I have a choice and I don't have to act on that thought even when it comes. But definitely, you know, there's some days that when just life's smacking you in the face and, you know, there's that crazy thought that, you know, this might solve this problem, but you don't act on it. You just apply the principles of recovery.
It's kind of like when there's a brownie in the kitchen and I know I don't need it. I can't even fight that urge. So I don't know. I can't imagine how hard it is. I mean, honest to goodness, I cannot imagine how tough that struggle is and to actually overcome it. Because if you put a sugar sweet something in my kitchen, it doesn't matter how much I tell myself not to eat it, I'm going to end up eating it. So
Yeah.
I just can't imagine that. Like, so proud of you.
You know, but that's like today. So like if you hadn't eaten sugar or a brownie for 3 years, it would be a lot harder to make that decision. So I want to clarify, like the craving and the urge, nowhere near as strong as it used to be,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So it's not like that, but it's, and
Yeah.
also like the life that I've gained through these last 3.5 years through recovery, it also makes that decision so much harder. Like if you cut out sugar or you cut out sweets and you're fit and you've gained a lot of benefits from that decision and you're 3 years into it, you're like, it makes it hard to make that decision because you understand that you're going to give up these benefits that you've earned in the life that you've earned if you do so. So it definitely becomes easier in that sense. And the craving like that fit and the physical dependency part of it is not there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's awesome. That's, if you were here, I'd give you a round of applause. But seriously, that I can't imagine how much just discipline it takes. So I'm super proud of you and anybody that's gone through that. And I actually have a really good friend I've gotten close with lately. He's in the music scene, and he talked about he kind of struggled with the same thing, and they were actually pretty much gonna lock him up, like put him in a, I don't even know the best word, that it's not a penitentiary, but it's almost just like a house for people like that, and just keep him locked up. And somebody came to him, gave him a second chance and said, hey, we believe that you can turn around. They met with the board, ended up letting him out into life and giving him a second chance. And I just think, how many people get locked up or put away or put in like a house and don't get that chance because nobody saw them, which is a whole different conversation. But ever since he told me that and talking to you, I'm just like, what if people didn't see you and the opportunities that could have come from that? You know what I mean? Some
Absolutely.
people just need a little bit of help, a little bit of light to get out of that dark place. So, because both of you had ended up being amazing, inspiring, just great, great people in the world. You just had a tough time.
Yeah. And, you know, incarceration or punishing someone or shaming someone is not the answer to addiction. Recovery and treatment is the answer to addiction. And, you know, that's the path to give someone their life back. And then when they get their life back, the sky's the limit. You know, some people that are involved in drug and alcohol addiction are some of the smartest, most innovative, creative people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you become that way when you're living that life. You know, it may not seem like it, but you're essentially waking up each and every day and battling to live. And you're making something out of nothing each and every day. And you know, you put yourself in some incredibly dangerous situations. And my point is that giving someone an opportunity to find recovery and treatment is the answer to addiction. And there are great programs in jails and penitentiaries as well, which is good. So I'm very thankful for that, especially here in Arkansas. They're making a lot of progress on offering recovery programs while someone is incarcerated, so they can, be addressing, you got to get down to the reasons that we use drugs and alcohol. There's reasons behind all these things, and there's reasons we all kind of end up going down that path. And until you really address those, you can't really pull up the roots and kind of start planting some new seeds.
I know you kind of mentioned going to church and going to meetings and meeting with these guys. And I see you post pictures all the time. You're so social, which I feel like is super important, because one of the worst things you can do is just isolate and be by yourself. So what's something this long into it that helps you stay clean and helps you stay on the right track? Like, is that pretty much what it is? Church and meetings and friends and...
Well, so there's the steps of recovery. There's 12 steps, and the 12th one, and you don't work these steps. You're like, all right, 12, I'm done, go on.
Yeah.
You just someday you're working through them all in one day. Every day I wake up, I have to, step one, I admit that I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol. And if I start using again, my life will become unmanageable. But step 12 is giving back. It's all about taking the message and sharing it with other people. And so I do that. I get to do that for a job, and it's amazing that I get to work with people that are in the exact same place that I was not too long ago. 3.5 years ago is not that long ago. And so to be able to share that with someone and kind of walk them through that process and walk with them is, that's part of my recovery. But, I go to certain meetings throughout the week, recovery meetings, where I get to open myself up, be vulnerable, share openly, honestly, and transparently, and about what I'm going through, my personal recovery, because even though I'm all about giving back and helping others, I got self-care, and maintaining my own personal recovery is number one, because if I'm not doing that, I will eventually neglect that so much where I will be no use to anybody else. I can't pour from an empty cup. And so I have to continuously fill my cup up. And what that looks like for me is attending recovery meetings, surrounding myself with other people in recovery, and also the local church and the faith community is very, very important to me. It's a very big part of my life, my story. Relationship with Jesus and the local church is what ultimately saved my life. And so I'm heavily involved in both areas of life. In a lot of ways, they overlap. But I have two different kind of tracks that I focus on, in my faith track and my recovery track. And sometimes they marry each other and come together, and sometimes they're separate. But both of them give me life. Both of them give me accountability. Both of them give me a safe place to process through what I'm going through. And, they both also give me a place to give back. So that's kind of what it looks like for me. And sometimes it's just on a daily basis, talking on the phone with people and things that might be normal. Recently I was transitioning or getting job opportunities offered for me. I've never been in that place in my life where someone's offering me a job. So that was new for me, that's a new thing. And so I had to talk to people and process through, what do I do here? And how does this look? And what are all these feelings? And I'm getting frustrated. I'm scared, anxious, insecurity, all this stuff. So just talking through life with people is one of the most important things for me too.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't imagine the people that have to do it on their own or think they have to do it on their own. And kind of like you said earlier, it's almost like part of the process is to be alone and realize your family cut you off. And you said, although it's really hard, that's kind of the right thing to do because you don't want to enable people. So I can only imagine how dark and lonely that is. But to see where it led is just super cool. That's awesome. That's really awesome. So speaking of your mom and things like that, I know you said obviously it kind of hindered your relationship during that time and you came back. So when you came back and you were like, no, okay, for real, I'm quitting this time. Was she super hesitant about it? Did she believe you? How did that work out? How did you get your family back on your side and to realize you're actually changing this time?
Yeah, it wasn't that kind of conversation. It wasn't hey, I'm doing this.
Good. Yeah.
It was, I was on my own, okay. They came and visited me at detox, they're there. My family was there, no doubt, but they let me go, and what I mean by that is they let me spin out of control and do my things and keep me in jail, not bail me out, and let me be homeless. Don't listen to the sad stories, all those things. And then when this happened, when, like I said, my uncle had picked me up and dropped me off, and then I went to the hospital. They came and visited me a few days in, and it wasn't oh, okay, we believe you, let's go now. I think it was 4 or 5 months into the program where they were I think they had even, my mom was like, hey, if you want to come home, you can. And that was, I think this is one of the most pivotal times where they recognized some change where I said, that's not what I want to do. Not that I don't appreciate it, but I know that's not where I'm supposed to be. So it was more of like my relationships with my family are just a side effect of the process. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily something that was improved on the moment that I made a decision. It's like a long game. I did a lot of hurt, a lot of damage. And I used to say that I was changing a lot of different times. I mentioned, I put on a pretty good front that I was doing okay. So, today, just even like last week, just having some really great conversation with mom and dad just about where I'm at in life and how proud they are of me. I'm allowed to be at the house. They want me at the house. My dad let me borrow his truck to help someone move. Like I remember like crying when I was doing that, and because it was just such a big deal. Like my dad let me take his vehicle. That was like, because I'd done that in the past and I totaled their cars. So that was a big deal. But it took a while. So I also would say that if anybody's on that path and there's been damage done in their family, trust that the process will restore those relationships, but it will take time. And it will take more than us saying we're going to do something. It's going to take a lot of us doing what we're saying we're doing, and probably doing that for an extended period of time, and maybe not even seeing any results. But somewhere along the way, people will see there's some change happening and there's some real change occurring. And, and there'll be times for restoration in those relationships to occur.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's awesome. So I guess things with your parents are doing pretty good. I saw you post a video of, I guess, a nephew or something on his toy.
My little cousin. Yeah.
A cousin. Yeah. Man, it was so sweet. So cute. Man, that is awesome to be able to get back with your family and then to trust you. Like that feeling of trust. I can't imagine how awesome that feels. Being able to take his truck and makes me want to cry for you. That's awesome. So cool.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I'm so thankful. I'm thankful for my parents, my family that, like I said, there's a period of time where they had to let me go, understandably so, but they never gave up on me, so don't ever give up. Don't ever give up on the family members, but, sometimes you got to let them go. And I'm thankful that the moment that I did turn back and start getting help, they were in my corner, and they were on my team.
Yeah, man, that's great. All right. So last question for me, and then we're going to go in. We got about 10 questions from people that emailed and wanted me to ask you. We got about 15 minutes before Instagram kicks us off, so we'll kind of go quick. All right, what is one piece of advice that you would give others that are struggling? So like I said, I know several people personally that have in the past or that are currently doing so. So if you had to pick one thing, what would it be? What would your word of advice be?
I would say don't believe the lie that you're alone. And what I mean by that is to reach out. And I know it may be hard and I know it may be difficult, but don't believe that you're alone and that there's not someone that's going to be there for you. Because if nobody else is, I'm here and I will help you. I will walk with you. But more than anything, just don't believe that lie, because I know I felt that way for a long time. I believed that I was alone, and it kept me from reaching out. It kept me from, even trying to pursue help. So I am going to give you, I can say it right now, but my phone number that anybody wants help, they can call me. And my cell phone number is 501-794-9930. And you can call me and we can walk through that journey together. But just don't believe the lie that you're alone, because you're not.
Yeah, I love it. Ironically enough, I'm wearing my You're Not Alone shirt. Yeah, I'm huge on people knowing that you're not alone. It does not matter what you're struggling with. Addiction, there are millions of people struggling with the exact same thing. All right, so let's go to the questions I got in the email. Are you ready for a pop quiz?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. I would like Kyle to talk about the mental process, what it was like to finally surrender to your very bottom, to give up and to ask for help. So I guess they want to know kind of what was your thought process at the darkest days, just to get on your knees and say, I'm done. How was that mentally?
I kind of referred to it a little bit earlier. So like I mentioned, I went to a faith-based program and I had no experience really with church or the Bible or God or anything like that. But in that first 6 to 8 weeks, I'm learning a lot, hearing a lot, and I started opening the Bible. And I was struggling with 9 months. Like I had to go through this program for 9 months. Forget that. I ain't trying. I'm not interested
Forget
in that.
that.
Well, there's a scripture in Matthew 7. I think it's like verse 24 or something. And it talks about a wise man and a foolish man, and they build their house. One of them builds their house on sand, and one of them builds their house on rock. And God spoke to me through His Word, not audibly, but through reading that scripture. And He said, "You have been a fool building your house on sand. What I'm trying to teach you and show you here is a way to be wise and build your house on the rock." And that takes some time. And so that was one of the moments that I really remember clearly of saying, okay, like it's time. Like let's do this. And I thought worst case scenario, at the end of 9 months, my life's going to be a little bit better than it is today.
Yeah.
But God had much more in store when it comes to changing and transforming my life. And but that was kind of what it looked like, where I said, you know what, you're right. Like I'm a fool.
Got nothing to lose. Nothing
Yeah.
to lose.
Yeah.
Man, aren't we all? We're all fools. Don't feel alone in that either. All right. We kind of touched on this one too. It said, how did you actually know you were finally ready? So I guess just being at the very bottom, huh? Like no
Well,
house, no family.
Yeah, I saw that question, and I'll say I didn't know. I mean, I
Yeah,
didn't know. People, I mean, my circumstances is what led to me getting help. I did not
true.
start
Good
this
point.
process with a huge desire to change my life and stop getting high and drinking. I started this process because I was scared, one, because of the things that I was experiencing in my mind and in my, I was hallucinating. And then I had nowhere else to go. So really my homelessness is what led me to go into treatment. That was my initial motivation. So I didn't know
Yeah.
I didn't know I was ready.
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't know, but I learned, I got somewhere where I was still for long enough, and the chemicals
Yeah.
getting out of my mind and body, and got some medication to stabilize me, and I got to a place where I could receive. And that's when I started realizing, like I'm ready. I want to do something for real.
Yeah. I love it. That's awesome. All right, here's another one. Sometimes people fall into addiction because they think that it can help them. What would your thoughts on that perspective be? So what kind of advice, I guess, would you give somebody that's like, man, drugs, they help me. That's what helped me get through the day.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I can certainly agree to that. I think at the beginning of all of our journeys, when it comes to this, we all want to change the way that we feel for some reason, and for whatever reason, we're getting help from that, whether it's to feel comfortable in our own skin, whether it's to cover up some old pain or some hurt that we've experienced. And so I think a lot of people start their journey of substance use, whether they become addicted or not. Substance use a lot of times is covering something up. And my thoughts on it is, it's possible to feel those feelings and to process those things that you've gone through without using a substance to cope with it.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's oftentimes not fun, but it's where you can gain some authentic, true freedom and healing from it, is when you face it without covering up, and you kind of, you rip that Band-Aid off and you kind of clean out that wound. And the healing process, it doesn't just heal overnight. It takes some time, but when it heals back, it's strong, it's good, it's complete, and there's not that wound still there being infected. So I agree with it, the statement that the person made, and my thoughts on it was to be that, as long as you're covering it up, you're never really going to actually deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. Absolutely. Somebody asked, is it okay to slip up? So I imagine a lot of people get super down on themselves when you're addicted. You do really well for a while, and then you accidentally fall into it one day, you have a bad day, or you slip up. What's your advice on that?
Yeah, well, I would say that you never want to encourage someone to go use or drink, right? But it's a part of recovery. Some
Yeah.
people, it's a part of my story. I went to treatment 3 times. This last time I went was my 3rd time. And so the previous times, I went back out and kept doing the same old thing. But I learned a lesson all those times. I look back and I learned something from it. And so if you do find yourself in a place where you slipped up and you've returned to using or drinking, the important thing is that you're alive. And I know it takes a lot of courage and strength to admit that, hey, I slipped up. But know this, that in recovery rooms and meetings, like you're going to be welcomed with open arms and embrace, because falling down is not the problem. It's when we stay down. That's the problem.
Yeah.
We got to
Good
get
way.
back up. So it's okay to fall, but you got to get back up and learn from that fall. Take
Yeah.
something from that and apply it to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think really that could go for anybody. I mean, we all have bad days, whether it's turning to drugs or alcohol or overeating or whatever the things we touched on, but it's okay. You're gonna have bad days, you know, and
Hmm.
not that it's okay to go and get super schmammered one day, but don't be so ashamed that you don't get back up and continue the process. Like people are gonna forgive you. You had a bad day. We're human. That's kind of part of how we function. We're gonna mess up, right?
Yeah.
All right. If you were to pick one thing, somebody wants to know what is the main thing that helped you get through.
I mean, that's an easy one. Well, I came into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and what that
Yeah.
entails for me is like a day-to-day pursuit of being more like Him, being closer to Him, surrounding myself with people that are also doing that same thing, and that is what has got me through, what continues to get me through, and it's that rock that I was talking about earlier, the
Yeah.
rock that you build
Yeah.
the foundation on. And so that's what allows me to, endure the storms of life and to stay strong and to keep moving forward and, to live to see another day, for lack of better words.
I love it. Absolutely. So we talked about this. Somebody wanted to know how genetics played part of addiction, but we'll go with the first part of that. And it was, did you struggle with an addictive personality growing up? So I know you said you started at age 12, but before that, did you notice addictive things for anything else? I mean, TV shows, personalities, anything.
Yeah, certainly. I think before that and then everything in between, I mean, take drugs and alcohol out of the equation. Like I was a type of person, like if I didn't do something, I didn't do it. But then the first time I tried it for the first time, then I just did it. It would just became a part of who I am and what
Yeah.
I did. And so that certainly translated into drug and alcohol use. But I mean, whatever it may be, finding balance in life is a very tricky thing
Yeah.
to do with someone that struggles with addiction because we're always used to either living way up here or living way down here. And living right here just doesn't feel right. But like that's most life is just living right here. It's not really exciting.
Yeah.
It's not really crazy. So finding that to be normal and trying to learn how to be just okay with just the mundaneness of life is
Yeah.
it's a process that I'm still struggling with. But yeah, I think that the addictive personality is certainly I could definitely look back and see in the past and my present. I mean, I see it today still. Like
Yeah.
finding the way to balance things out is so important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, somebody, what's up, Nick? Okay, so Nick asked, why do current addicts tend to lack guilt about their actions towards their family members? Which you kind of related to that as well, talking to your mom kind of disrespectfully, and you said a lot of hurtful and nasty things. So, what is that? What is the lack of guilt there?
Well, because you have to realize that the individual that you're interacting with is not your family member.
Yeah,
The person is sick, and they are in the middle of addiction. And what you're perceiving as such a disrespectful, blatantly action that could be so clear to anybody else, you don't see it. You're blinded because your every action, every decision, every thought is driven by whatever your substance of choice is to get and to use that, and you destroy so many people. And so this is not it doesn't dismiss or excuse the actions. I've had to do a lot of work on making amends, asking for
yeah,
forgiveness, making things right. But at the same time, I honestly was not aware of what I was doing. And it wasn't until I did get into recovery for a little, and part of the recovery process is looking back and reevaluating, taking an inventory of the things that you've done in your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, and kind of looking at, and that sucks. That hurts,
man,
it
yeah,
hurts to look at that stuff. But part of that process is acknowledge it, kind of like we were talking about earlier, acknowledging those things, digging those roots up, confronting them and taking ownership in them. If you can do things to make it right and move forward. But in the middle of it, honestly, I had no idea the type of havoc that I was causing on my loved ones and my friends. And so it's not something that I was really intentionally doing.
yeah, yeah, man, that's sad, but I can't imagine how painful that is to kind of want to help yourself and you're doing good. And then that session where they're like, okay, think about all the bad things you've done and just from a clear state of mind, replaying that and being able to be like, oh my gosh, better start saying sorry to some people.
Yeah, and I mean that it's laid out as a process. Like be very
Well,
clear
sure.
about,
Oh,
like
absolutely.
you get to certain stages in this when you're ready. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. I'm sure every step is tough, and it's one at a time, because it would just be completely overwhelming to throw it all at you. But so for me, I'm kind of curious myself, like the friends that you had when you were the Kyle that did all the substance abuse. I'm sure you made, you talked about being super alone, but I'm sure you had your circle and your acquaintances of dealers and users. When you first transitioned into getting clean and what, I want to change, did they try to persuade you to come back? Were they still in your life? Did you have to completely just cut them out? How did that work?
Well, this is one of the reasons I'm a huge believer in treatment, and specifically long-term treatment. So the program I went to was a 9-month program, which means I didn't have a cell phone, I didn't have
Okay.
social media. I was in a program. I mean, I wasn't locked down. We were in the community.
Sure.
I was around a completely different group of people doing completely different things than I had been doing. And so I had a period of time where I was fully disconnected from all of that, and it made that easier. But once I had the opportunity I had a phone again, I learned that, like, there are some like actions that I've done that, if I could reach out to people and apologize, I would. But as far as my old friends, like a lot of people may want to start trying to save their old friends. And I'm here for anybody, but like I've learned to just kind of live my life out loud and live it
Yeah.
in the manner that's been set before me. And those people will either reach out to me or I'll run into them in my life today. And if I do, that means I'm either at church or I'm at something to do with recovery. And so it's a
Wow.
safe
Yeah.
place.
That's
So
pretty
going
cool.
back and trying to, make those little connections for whatever reasons can be very dangerous. So I've kind of let, God kind of like sort that out. And if someone's meant to be back in my past, which have a lot of, a lot of fraternity brothers, a lot of friends that
Yeah.
were good people, and I actually hurt. Like I've had the opportunity to reconnect with them and kind of catch back up.
Yeah. That's really cool. And that's awesome. Um, so last thing, and then we'll be done. Kind of tell people what you're doing now. Again, we touched on, you do peer recovery and things like that. What does that look like? Where do you do your speeches and your recovery? Like, where is that located? And how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more, or if, if they decide, I want part of that. I want that happiness. What does it look like for you? Where are you working, and how can they reach out to you?
Okay, yeah, peer recovery. So it's essentially your lived experience in addiction is the most valuable thing to bring to the table. And so even though I have a degree in addiction studies, it really has nothing to do with what I do for a job. It's my recovery that qualified me for this position. And so being in recovery for 2 years or longer, you go through a training through the state for peer support. And once you go through that training, you begin a process of becoming certified, just like any other credentialing process. You get credentialed, and then they're hiring people like me at hospitals, jails, treatment centers, reentry programs, different settings like that to work with other individuals that are trying to get into recovery. And so for me, what that looks like is I work in the emergency department at UAMS. I was the first peer specialist in the state to be working in this capacity in an ER. And so when someone comes in, if they want to talk to me, I'll approach them, have a conversation with them, share my story, listen to their story, or get them connected to resources if that's what they'd like to do. I give out naloxone or Narcan to individuals that come in for overdose for them to take home with them to have access to. And if nothing else, like people have my number that they take with them, and from that point forward, they can reach out and call me at any point in time for me to get them connected to recovery and to treatment resources. And so I kind of just walk that journey, whatever that looks like for the individual. I don't give advice. I don't tell someone what to do. I simply share from my lived experience, and I guide the individual in whatever it is that they want to do, and kind of talk through that process, because navigating treatment is not the easiest thing to do in the world. And so when you're at that place where you're open-minded to that, if there's anything I can do to make that process easier for you, that's what I'm there for. And just kind of walk it with you. I'm also a supervisor. I'm one of the first 10 supervisors in the state. So I essentially supervise other people working in this field, and kind of navigate what they're going through and how they're working, and help train. I go around and I share my story as often as I can. If someone asks me to share my story, I believe that what I've gone through is not just for me to have a better life. It's for me to share with other people and for them to know that there's nothing special or unique about Kyle. The process of recovery and a relationship with God will make the same thing happen in your life. And it's just all about entering into that. And so I try to share that with the hope of giving people hope and the hope of people, find a little motivation to kind of pursue the same thing in their life. And so that looks different. I go a lot of different places, whether it be in the recovery world or the faith-based community world. And I'm so grateful for those opportunities to do that. I'm actually getting ready to start a new job next week where I'll be kind of overseeing this project of credentialing peer support throughout the state. So I can't get into too many details because I don't know exactly what it's all going to look like, but it's a really cool opportunity. It's a really great kind of step in the direction that I'm going. It's super thankful for it, but
Very good. I couldn't hear the very end of that. I'm not sure what happened. I see you, but I can't hear you. So very good. Awesome. Congratulations on your job. So kind of like Kyle said earlier, you can reach out to him. He gave his cell phone number and we can post that in the group, but you can also reach him on Facebook at Kyle Brewer. You can find him on Instagram. His name is on here and everything. So feel free to reach out to him. You can reach out to me as well. Absolutely. We're both here for you. I'm kind of with Kyle. My biggest thing, especially with this Q&A once a month, is you shouldn't feel alone. People are going through it. And I think the best thing that you can do is to realize you didn't just go through it for you, but you went through it to relate to people. You know what I mean? So you wouldn't be able to touch as many people as you have and save as many people as you have if you couldn't relate personally. So that is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think he's having a little technical difficulty, but maybe he can hop back on here. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. It was a ton of fun. I loved hearing Kyle's story. If you like these questions, these Q&As once a month, please feel free to join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Townsendtmusic. And so that's kind of how all this goes on. That's how it's sponsored. So feel free to look on there, join my team. Well, we're just about to go. Thank you so much for being on. It's been a blessing. It has been awesome. Everybody reach out to Kyle if you have any questions. Thanks for logging on, and we'll see you guys later. I'll wave so that he can hear me. Bye, Kyle.
If you're looking to buy or sell, I have the perfect realty company for you. Clark & Co. Realty is located in the Benton, Bryant, Arkansas area. And they understand that buying or selling a home is more than just a transaction. It's a life-changing experience. That's why their team of highly seasoned real estate professionals is dedicated to providing exceptional, personalized services for all their clients. They truly take great pride in the relationships they build, and they always work relentlessly on the client's behalf to help them achieve their perfect real estate goals. They always have the client in mind, and I can speak firsthand when I say how reliable, trustworthy, and quick they were. When I was looking to buy my first home, they were there with me every step of the way, answering every question I could think of. They showed me a great amount of knowledge and patience through the process. It's no wonder they've won so many awards for their outstanding services and their excellent relationships with clients. So if you're looking to buy or sell, there is no better option than Clark & Co. Realty. If you enjoyed this conversation and are interested in becoming a sponsor, feel free to shoot me an email at townsendtmusic@hotmail.com or shoot me a message on any social media platform at Townsendtmusic for more information. I would love for you to become a member to help spread awareness that you're not alone.